Peace, everybody. Everybody needs it this week. Peace and love to us all. Welcome. Welcome. Take a moment here. Take a breath for the world. So, welcome once again to Not Church on Sunday Morning. Last week, I told the first part, as it turns out, of my near-death experience, my second near-death experience. I thought I'd get the whole thing in, but it was my first telling on camera at length. And so I guess it was at length. It's a little longer than I thought it was going to be. So we're going to pick up in the telling of it in just a moment. So if you haven't heard the beginning from last week, you might want to circle back there and take a listen to what happened. Before I do, I'll say hi to Michael Powell and Arian and Betty A. All right. So thanks for being here this morning. So where we left off last week was that I was in the ambulance. I had died. I was inside myself, looking around to see what was. I'll backpedal a little bit and catch up a little bit. So I was in the ambulance, and I heard the paramedic radio into Portland hospital in Portland, Maine Medical Center, and she said, "We're losing him." And I heard, because in meditation you can hear things, and I was meditating to control my pain. And so I opened my eyes and I saw her face in fear. And as soon as she saw me open my eyes, her face went right back to professional, because that's what they do. They're very good at their jobs. But the pain came rushing back at me. So I closed my eyes and I went back inside. And when I went inside myself in order to meditate to control my pain, it turns out I didn't go back inside myself. I came outside of myself. And I knew that I was still in the ambulance, but I couldn't see the ambulance. My psyche, my self, my human self, was more like a wide cavern. And I was above this cavern. And in the tunnel, I was in the darkness. The darkness returned. And down this tunnel came this entity, this angel, this being I know and love. And it was communicating to me, "Come to us, come to us. It's time to come to us. Welcome, welcome." All these voices speaking as one. And I'll talk about that for a second. Someone asked me, why is it one and so many voices? Why? How can it be the oneness and so many voices? If you remember back to my first NDE, when I talked about the field of photons metaphor, analogy, and I talked about its great depth and height and width and breadth, and that it was made of a septillion singular photons as a field of photons, each one individuated, each one part of the oneness of being, and that I was part of that oneness, but I was outside of it, and I had my own photonic self. This was the many and the one. This many and the one is also found in the beginning of the Christian Bible, where in Genesis, the Yahweh, the name, speaks in the plural, we, us. The sense of the many not only is in terms of the divine itself, but it's in the subdivisions, including us. We are part of the many. And so that's what that was going on. This angelic being, which was 10,000 times larger than myself, came rushing down and reduced itself to make itself approachable to me, and was calling me back with love. "Come, welcome. We've been waiting for you. It's your time. Come on." And I thought to myself, I'm out of here. And so I sort of took its hand. It had no hand and I had no hand, but I was paralleling with it. Instead of this time instead of as happened last time, where it enveloped me and took me, this time I was outside of it, sort of paralleling it, but touching, connected to it. And as I started to go up with it, I thought to myself, I should take a look around inside myself to see whether I'm ready. Because I realized that it was a sudden event and I hadn't really prepared anything or my family for this. And I knew what was going on. The previous time that I died, I didn't know what was going on. But this time I knew, and so I thought to myself, "Oh, I'm gonna take a peek around, make sure everything's okay." So I turned around away from this angelic orb of consciousness and looked back inside this wide mouth cavern of my soul, that's not the right word, of my mind, of my brain, of my life. And so I went back inside. I didn't join with it, but I looked around sort of like an explorer in a cave with a flashlight. I'm looking around, looking for things, and I see my son's face, as I mentioned last week, and how he had leaned in and looked in my eyes and said, "I love you, Dad." And all of his emotions that went along with that. He wasn't prepared for me to die. He was shocked. He was sad. He was all the emotions that go along with this, scared. And then I saw my daughter and I saw her life and how she had left her marriage and that had been a difficult marriage, let's say. And she had taken the baby and escaped up to the Boston area. And we were helping her. And I looked at her and I realized that she needed me. And then I looked at my granddaughter, who was less than a year old, and I saw two lives for her, as I had seen with my parents. I saw her life with me and her life without me. And I guess I knew that my kids would be okay. Not that that would have been any fun for them, losing me so suddenly, but I realized that they could live, but they weren't really ready for me to go, and I didn't want to leave them. But when I saw my granddaughter, I realized that with me in her life, she would have a male figure, and without me, she wouldn't. And that the space between those was a better life and a life that's lesser. And as you know, I'm thinking this through as I'm telling this story. I'm trying to figure out how to tell the story as I tell the story. So I saw these two lives of hers, and I realized that she really needed me and my kids really needed me. And so I went back outside myself, and the angelic being had retreated, kind of turned its back a little bit politely so that it wouldn't be paying attention to me, really. Although that's crazy because it has no back and it could hear everything, but it sort of receded at a distance to be polite and give me space. And so I went back outside myself, and the angelic being came rushing toward me and communicated the same message. "Come on, come on, come on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We've been waiting for you. It's time for you to come home." And I communicated telepathically. This is all telepathically. This is not language. There's no language here. There's no brain. I had no brain. And I communicated to this my angelic friend, my angel of death, that if it's all the same with you, I'd like to stay. And I didn't wait for a reply. I turned around and went back inside. And I came to just before the hospital or around the time I got to the hospital. I'm not really sure exactly. I'm sure that she had shot me up. The paramedic must have, turned a dial somewhere, or punched a button, and something happened intravenously. And I came back in the ambulance just outside the hospital. The doctor and the nurses, in a cluster, met me and wheeled me as down the hallway. The doctor saw that I wasn't on morphine because morphine makes me sick, as I mentioned before, and so I was using meditation to control my pain, which is something that anybody can learn. Breath and the brain, the biochemical brain somehow, or the wires in the brain. Somehow you can rise above the pain. If you have an ache in your back and you're meditating, just stare at it, bring your breath to it, bring your mind to it, and keep concentration on it. And you'll notice that you rise above it. And stick a tack under your seat if you want. If you want to try it, sit on a tack. Anyway, so I'm in the hospital and I'm being wheeled down the hallway, and the doctor with this cluster of nurses around him, and I should call them the surgical team. The surgical team around him, that's a much better term. He's with his surgical team and he's reading a chart, and he says, this guy doesn't have any morphine. Give him some morphine. I was like, no, I don't want any morphine. Yeah, he said, why not? I said, well, because it makes me sick. He said, well, how have you been handling your pain? I told him meditation. I'm meditating. He said, well, you're about to go into surgery. I said, well, is it going to hurt? He said, no. Well, I'm gonna give you an incision in your wrist, but you don't really need morphine for that. I'm gonna just snake this thing up your arm and into your heart, and, we're gonna cut around. You can't really feel it in there, and then we're gonna probably see what we have and maybe put a stent in or 2. We'll see what's up. I got 1 in the end, and, I was like, "Well, then don't give me anything. I'll meditate." So we're into the catheterization lab, and they cut me open. I got a little slit on my wrist, this little tiny 1 centimeter thing, and they up my arm, and I can't say I could feel it, but it's sort of like there was a pressure on the inside, but it didn't hurt. And right in there snaking around, and he's got a little camera on the end of it. He said, "Oh, I see some ski moguls in there." And I was like, "Oh, some moguls, I'm a skier." And he said, "I thought you were meditating." I said, "I am, but I'm also listening," which I think surprised them that I could hear. And that's something that surprises lots of people if they don't meditate, that you actually can hear what's going on around you. And so a silent room helps meditation because it eliminates one extra sensory input. That's an aside. So I'm in the I'm being reamed out, and he sees a couple of little moguls, which I took to mean I got other problems in there too. And so they put a stent in, and they put me up to ICU, SCU, special care unit in Maine, at least a Maine Med. And I was in there for God, 12 hours and no painkiller the whole time. I'm driving my mind. I have to be in my breath and in my mind the entire time. And I know the medical team's coming in. I know my wife is there. I know my kids are there. But I can't pay attention to them, because as soon as I'm paying attention to them, I'm not paying attention to my heart, and I'm not paying attention to my heart. The elephant standing on my chest comes back. It's okay. So now it's a baby elephant. It's still, a lot of pain. And I should give a little explanation here why I was in so much pain after, because I was way outside the golden hour by the time I got to the catheterization lab, by probably at least an hour, if not 2 hours, more likely 2 by the time I got there. It's an hour and a half ride in the ambulance just to the hospital. And by the time I left the urgent care center in Booth Bay Harbor, I had already expended more than an hour. So I had damage in my heart. S- And and it turns out that only 6% of people survive a widowmaker heart attack. That's a pretty small percentage. I'm in that group. I ended up with heart damage, and what that means in the long run for me is that I used to, in my if my in my exercise sporting life, I could hit 100. I had the top end of my heart was 100. Now it's 75 probably. I've got uh, something. I can't quite be as uh, energetic, I don't know, as I used to be. So I'm in the ICU, and I can't talk to my family, can't pay attention to my family, because I have to meditate to keep my heart without hurting me. And I reached this exhaustion period. I don't know how long I've been meditating. Let's say 14 hours. I don't really know. Could have been 12, could have been 18. I'm not really sure, because I don't know what time it is. And I say to the nurse, I can't do this anymore. Do you have anything that you can give me other than morphine? And my wife was standing next to me, and she explained this to the nurse, and she actually was the communicator, I think. And the nurse is like, "Oh yeah, we have something else." I was like, "Oh my god, you could have given me this to me." I'm thinking to myself, 14 hours ago, but they give me this thing. It doesn't make me sick. It knocks me out, takes my pain away. Whatever it was, I don't know. Next morning, I wake up. I'm a little bit better. They wheel me out of the SCU, into my own room, and in this room, on my bed, there are a whole bunch of people. And it's my wife and my daughter and the baby, my granddaughter, my son, a couple of doctors I know, some of my neighbors from Portland who I know, a crowd of people in the room, maybe 10 people, maybe, I guess. I don't really remember. Anyway, so I decided to tell them immediately that I died. And previously in my life, I hadn't talked about it for 20 years, as you know, and then I came out of the closet with it, and I'd been on television talking about it, and uh, I was having this book come out. Heaven is Beautiful was just going to come out. It was going to come out in a month, and in 9 weeks, I had to be in New York City for a morning TV talk show, one of these nationally syndicated things that my publisher got for me. And I just like, oh my God, I can hardly believe I did that going to New York 9 weeks later. So I announced to everybody that I died again. And they're all like, what? And I told them the story, basically what I just told you. And my son said to me, well, Dad, when I said, I love you, and it was with the most emotion, maybe one of the top emotional sentences I've ever heard in my life that conveyed the fullness of the meaning. He said, the doc told me to say goodbye to you. He said, you weren't going to make it. You were going to die on the way, and there's nothing they could do about it. My wife, who I had already talked to a lot about how my desire to die, I didn't want to take my own life. It's not, I don't, as a created being, as a photon of the many, I couldn't take what I didn't create. So she said, I'm surprised you're here too. Everybody was surprised in my family that I was alive. And well, I came back a different person. Every time a mystical experience happens, a shattering can occur. Every time a major mystical experience can happen, a shattering can occur, where it's like all of the pieces break and fall apart into 1,000 pieces. If you get 1,000 piece puzzle, then they reassemble somehow with modified pieces, and there's fewer of them. Like a lot of stuff is gone, and it's more um, centralized, more dense, more connected, less in the way. And so then a whole series of events happened. I knew that I had changed. And when I was still in the hospital bed, my publisher called me and said that the book was coming out a month early. So it was released when I was in the hospital, coming out on Amazon a month early, and which was a super surprise. So here I am lying in my hospital bed, having just died, and my book on dying comes out unexpectedly. And all my buddies called me up, and when they found out about my closer buddies, they're like, "Is this a promotional thing that you're doing, Peter? That you're promoting your book through dying?" Which was pretty funny, but it hurt to laugh. So, and then the TV station called me. The vice president of the TV station. I've been having this show on two NBC stations in Maine for 15 years. Is that how long I was? Yeah, 15 years. It was 91 years old when it ended, and I had the last 15 years of it. Broadcasting on television and radio, telling a sacred story in the morning. That's what that gold book is. 365 of the 1,700 stories I wrote. I liked working there. It was a nonprofit I worked for that was sistered into the TV station and had been for 91 years by the time it ended. But the vice president, who was a super nice guy, my relationship with the TV station, all the people who work there, top to bottom, was fabulous. It was I couldn't imagine a better place to work alongside of. Anyway, the VP called me and said, "As soon as you can talk, we should talk." I said, "Hey, I'm in the hospital. I just had a heart attack." He said, "Well, call me when you get home." So I called him when I got home, and I found out that a corporation had purchased all of these TV stations, 40 other TV stations, and this grab bag, and it included the 2 TV stations I was on. And when they looked over the TV stations, they realized that they still had this thing on in the morning that many TV stations had on for decades, where there would be a minister praying in the morning, before as the flag rose and the song played, and maybe you remember this if you're old enough. And we were the last ones, and nationally, we were also the first ones. First Radio Parish Church of America began in 1926 in Portland, Maine, on AM radio with WCSH, which became AM radio, WCSH AM radio, which in the 1950s became WCSH Channel 6. And so this organization had become an institution in the state of Maine, broadcasting originally telling, broadcasting for an hour on Sunday morning with choirs and organs and preaching and the whole churchy thing. By the time I got it, decades later, I had 2 minutes every morning just before the weather to tell an inspirational story that was non-sectarian and never mention religion, which is what I did. And I got recruited to it. And that's another story. But anyway, Mike called me, the VP called me, and he said, we're going to have to cancel your show. I was like, oh, I'm in the freaking recovery here. So through long conversation with our board of trustees, the First Radio Parish Board of Trustees, we tried to make it. But we got bumped back from 6:15 to 5:15, which cut our audience in half, which cut our income by 2/3. So we had to close. There was no way we were going to be able to swing it, and go independent. We didn't had nowhere to go. So the show closed, and I kept my mouth shut about it for the entire time. And by the end, it was over. I got a little bit of a severance, and I began my yoga practice again, my deep yoga practice. I was practicing an hour and a half every day and had a period of time. Went looking for a job, couldn't find work. Started looking in churches, didn't want to go back to churches again. As what am I qualified for here? Well, church. So 2 churches, one in eastern Massachusetts, northeastern Massachusetts, one in central New Hampshire, both very nice churches, both historic. The first one hosted Swami Vivekananda when he came to the United States for the Chicago World's Fair back at the turn of the last century. And the other, so it was right north of Boston, and there's ocean, and it's just beautiful on Cape Ann. And then the other church was in the middle of the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire, which was great for skiing and mountain biking. And they were good people. They're all good people. But every time I looked inside the church with my inner vision, all I could see was darkness and gloom for me. Darkness and gloom everywhere I looked. There was even a church in Connecticut who was willing to come along with me as I told them, look, I'm not the same person anymore. I can't pretend that I'd been a believer. I can't, I am a near-death experiencer, and I need to express this in my life. I can't do what we were doing. And they wanted to change. That church was like, we're open to change. We'd like you to come. I laid everything on the table. Oh, I should add that the first 2 churches, the reason why I left them is because, why they didn't hire me is because I told them about the movie contract. And the movie contract immediately was a no-go for either of them. We're in negotiations, like financial negotiations. We're right at the end of the whole process. Oh yeah, I got this movie contract. They're like, nope. So there was this church in Connecticut, and they were interested in me. And interestingly enough, the brother-in-law of one of the deacons was Dr. Bruce Grayson, famous Dr. Bruce Grayson from IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies. And so he went back channel and, looked me over. And they were willing to hire me, but I couldn't leave my granddaughter. And it was right before COVID struck. I couldn't leave my granddaughter because that's way in Connecticut, and they're way up in Maine. And so couldn't do it. Turned him down. Didn't know what to do. Started not church. Started teaching meditation. Started teaching Kriya Yoga. And now I'm completely out of the closet. I guess we don't have much time left, but I'll use it up, and then we'll go right to Zoom. We'll go right to Mystic Tea Salon. The link is in the show notes down below. And the big change for me was that now I knew that I only had so much time left. Even if I lived to 92 or 95, I've got this much time left to get this much work done. And so, stripped of my offices, my clergy office, stripped of my TV office, I'm free to pursue what I'd meant to pursue verbally and been trying to prepare myself for the whole of my life since the day that I died the first time in 1980. So, all of this that I'm doing here is a direct result of the second time I died. I'm trying to show people what I see. And what I see is that you are made of light and love. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to find it for yourself inside yourself. That's really what I'm trying to help you do. Because I know that in my journey between my first NDE and my second NDE, that which gave me balance in the world and center and light and love in the context of not only family, but deep community involvement, because I was the minister working with all sorts of people, criminals and the food challenged and the well-to-do, everybody, nobody was off my list. Deep inside the intimate nature of people's private lives. And all the time, what I found is that the more I dove inside myself, the greater my capacity became for living in the world. And now that I died this second time and I know how much, not how much time I have left, but I have some time left. Um, and my book came out. Now I'm a public figure about it. And there's no hiding and pretending. And yeah, definitely some of my neighbors think I'm nuts. One told me so the other day. Um, I know that I'm sane. I know that I'm sane because I know who I am and I know where I'm from. And I want to help other people find it too, or polish up what they have, or open their gate wider. The more of us that open our inner gate, the more of us that dive deep inside of the divine, the more heaven we bring here now. The more heaven we bring here now, the greater the opportunity we have to nudge humanity in a direction away from what we see. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes over at Mystic Tea. Peace and love to all. I hope that this helps. Just doing my best. Peace and love. I'll see you at Mystic Tea. Link is below.